Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm your host Gordon Smith and I'm joined as usual by Jay Shabbat. In part 1 we're talking leadership changes at Virgin Atlantic, and in part 2 we discuss Delta's latest earnings. Hi Jay, how's it going?
All right, Gordon, how's it going?
Doing very, very well, thank you. I sometimes say we're in the thick of earnings season. We are very much not there yet. Super Thursday is yet to come, but we did get Delta's
Getting
numbers.
there,
We are.
getting
We
close.
are. We're warming up. It is October 14th as we're recording here, and we've got United's numbers coming out a little later this week. By the time you all hear this, you will be privy to those numbers. We're not quite there yet. Such are the earnings gods and calendar gods. But we did get Delta's numbers last week, so we'll discuss those in a bit of detail in part 2, Jay. But first, on the agenda is Virgin Atlantic, because there have been some personnel changes at the top, or rather there will be some personnel changes at the very top as of the 1st of January. What's happening?
Yeah, and I'll let you fill in the news because I know you wrote an article about that, which I diligently read as I always do. But there is a CEO change at the top. So yeah, the CEO for how many years? I think you said was it 7 years? I read in your article that Shai Weiss was the CEO of Virgin Atlantic.
Yeah, that's right. He joined Virgin Atlantic in 2019. Not quite the worst timing. I mean, I think that award probably goes to Greg Foran over at Air New Zealand in terms of terrible timing. He joined the Kiwi carrier February 2020, if my mind recalls, in terms of pandemic mess and having to mop that up immediately after joining. But yeah, Shai joined 2019, but he was actually been with Virgin for a very, very long time. I had a quick look at his LinkedIn before coming on air, Jay, and he was with the Virgin Group, the wider sort of Virgin Empire, obviously Sir Richard Branson as the founder, way, 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 way back. He went back to 2001 with Virgin Media and various other roles outside of the airline. And then he was at the CFO at Virgin Atlantic from 2014, CCO in 2017, and then CEO from the start of 2019. So very much not quite a Virgin staffer, lifer, but he certainly rose up the ranks in the traditional corporate sense. And his replacement is another insider, if you like. We found out yesterday, October 13th, that Cornel Costa will be Virgin Atlantic's next chief executive, succeeding Shai. He's currently, if you recognize the name, the airline's chief customer and operating officer, and he rejoined Virgin Atlantic in 2019. And he's really been quite a central figure in rebuilding its operations and customer experience. If you beyond his Virgin time, if you do recognize his name, he was holding senior roles at Delta for a while, Aero Mexico, and KLM, also part of that sort of buddy group of wider airlines. But during his latest tenure, Costa oversaw the introduction of Virgin's A330 Neos and really delivering a lot of the digital operation transformation elements there. And he is broadly credited with helping stabilize the airline's performance and morale during the pandemic. So a known face, Jay. We obviously sometimes see airlines pick CEOs from outside of the company, particularly when they're looking for a change. But Cornel's certainly a relatively safe pair of hands, I would say.
Yeah, they opted for continuity over a big change, and I guess that makes sense. I mean, Virgin has made some good progress since their bankruptcy during COVID. I I'll take everyone back just a little bit for those who don't follow the airline closely, just a little bit about their situation and a tiny bit about their history. I'll start by invoking here a Financial Times article that I came across from earlier this year, and I think there was a line in this article that really summed up Virgin Atlantic really well. And they called the airline a company that has punched above its weight in branding and marketing, but struggled to consistently make money. And that latter point is, just put that in bold and highlight it because Virgin has really for decades, even in a good year, they'll make a little bit of money. Maybe a real good year, they'll make a so profit margin, but they've also suffered a lot of losses throughout the years. And of course, the bankruptcy that they experienced during COVID is really nothing too specific to them, just obviously it's so many different airlines went bankrupt during that period. That was a unique period. But going back before, even in 2019, they were a money losing airline, and it depends, at what level you're measuring. I think they did have a 2% operating profit margin in 2019. But if you look at pre-tax, the last time that Virgin actually earned a pre-tax profit was 2016 until 2024. So 2024 last year was a big comeback year for them, and still it wasn't, it wasn't anything that merited a, fireworks and and a parade down down the street or anything. It was their operating margin in 2024 was 7%. And just for context, Virgin's hated arch rival British Airways, their operating margin was double that last year. It was 14%. So you can see Virgin is has always kind of in a bad year it loses money. In a good year, it's just kind of a, lags behind. And so a couple of questions really. One obvious one is, why is this airline not been able to, become the profit champion that, say, British Airways has become? And then the other question is, can that change in the future? I'll say, I think over the years we've written a lot about Virgin's issues. In fact, if anyone's read my history book about Delta Airlines, Glory Lost and Found, we have a lot about Virgin in there. That book is getting a little bit old now, but the lot of the central premise was still there. So one, big issue they had, just as an example, in or let's call it the 2010s, pre-COVID, is that they did have a rather dysfunctional fleet, partially because of the 787 delays and, other
You
issues
say
with aircraft. They
you
were
say you say dysfunctional, Jay. I say fascinating from a advocate point of view. You didn't know if you were going to get an A340 or an old 74 or 7A. It was a fabulous time.
Yeah, if you like visiting aircraft museums, they they had a very fascinating one, to put it in your words, because they did have those, like you said, a lot of those old four engine
Yeah,
dinosaurs
what was
that
the tagline? 4 engines, 4 long haul they had across the livery at one stage on a special decal.
nice. Yeah, well, nice for, yeah, in a sense, but not so nice for anyone that owned the company.
Before we wrap up this part, Jay, I wanted to just highlight Shai's post on LinkedIn. I do find LinkedIn is actually a much better place to go for personal insights rather than the press release or the market filing. There was clearly a statement from Shai and from Cornell and Sir Richard himself, not to mention Ed Bastian from Delta. You mentioned they got the 49% shareholding there, all in the official press release. But Shai's post on LinkedIn, he said here, I feel that now is the right time to hand over the reins as we embark on our next 5-year plan. I will stand down as CEO on 31st of December 2025. Congratulations to Cornel Costa on his appointment, which is so well deserved. And he says, a huge thank you to the amazing people of Virgin Atlantic, as you expect. But this line I quite liked. Simply the best in the business. You are the beautiful red thread weaved by Richard. That's Sir Richard to you and me, which continues to run through everything. You have always made the journey special, rewarding, and fun. I love you and this great company. Always have, always will. And he's accompanied it with a selfie. It looks like at Farnborough with some cabin crew there in front of a Virgin aircraft. So, yeah, I think changing of the guard, if you looked more broadly and if you were just a little bit more clinical about it, he's been at the company for decades, and he's been at the top of Virgin Atlantic for 7 years. And most large corporations, a CEO probably has around 5, maybe 10 years tops in terms of shelf life before either the board politely asks them to move on or they choose to move on. So I would say, yeah, no great shock. He was fairly popular with the media. He always gave a good interview, but yeah, I don't think it's a complete changing of the guard, Jay. As you alluded at the top of the show, Cornell's a very safe pair of hands, no in quantity. And this would suggest to me that they're looking for the continuity candidate as opposed to anyone that's really going to go in and shake things up. Not to say that the airline doesn't need shaking up, as you alluded. The growth levers that it can pull are somewhat limited and pulled out of both of those. So currently it is Bangalore, which is the most easterly route.
Yeah, very good. So we'll, yeah, that's Soul Root. As you mentioned, it's having Korean Air as a friend on the other end is a very helpful aspect of that new route. So we'll see how that does and see if it winds up instigating any other or triggering any other additional East Asian routes. They pulled out of Shanghai and Hong Kong right not too long ago. I think you've written about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and they dropped Tokyo as well almost a decade ago.
Tokyo. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, that was that a decade ago. Okay, that's I couldn't remember when that was, but yeah, you could say. And well, I guess at one point they even flew to Australia, right, via Singapore.
I'm not sure if it was Singapore, but it was definitely somewhere. Singapore would be the most obvious contender, Jay. But yeah, I definitely remember seeing some Virgin tails on the ground in the early days down in
We'll have to
Sydney.
go. Well, I'll have to have a schedule archive party later today, and we'll go dig up the old Virgin schedule and see exactly where they flew. But but in any case, we know we can tell you for sure they don't fly to Australia currently.
We can say that for sure. Although Virgin Australia does, obviously by definition.
Virgin Australia does, yes. Glad you made that. We might have some newcomers to the industry that might be listening and be really confused right now. So
Uh,
I think that was an important clarification to all the newbies out there.
Happy to clarify for any newbies or any oldies or anyone in between. Thanks for that,
And
Jay. More on Virgin Atlantic's leadership changes in the next issue of Airline Weekly. And we wish, obviously, Cornel and his new team, whoever they may be, all the best. And whatever Shai gets up to, drop us an email, podcast@skift.com, if you want to talk to us and tell us what you're doing next. Right, Delta in part 2. But before that, a quick reminder to send any questions or comments that you might have for us to podcasts@skift.com. You don't have to be Shai Weiss to email that address. That's podcasts with an S at the end. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening or watching. And if you are enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can continue to spread the word about the Airline Weekly Lounge. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to the Airline Weekly Lounge. I'm Gordon Smith, joined as usual by Jay Shabbat. Part 1, we were discussing leadership changes at the top of Virgin Atlantic. Part 2, we are discussing Delta. And as we said in part 1, obviously quite friendly with Virgin, to put it mildly, 49% shareholding, Jay. We had the latest financials out of Delta last week as we're recording here, October 14th. For anyone that missed the latest issue of Airline Weekly or even missed Delta's financials in their entirety, what were the top line numbers? What were the key takeaways that our listeners need to know?
the operating margin, which is the number that is easily use to easily compare different airlines around the world. And they Delta did an 11.2%. We'll be precise out to the with the decimal there. 11.2%. That compares last year in the third quarter it was 9.4%. They did have some unusual situation last summer with the CrowdStrike IT outage. I don't know if I'm sure you remember that, Gordon. Some of our listeners probably do as well. There was the Paris Olympics. Was that last year as well?
It was.
It was, yeah, right. And I think they had to check myself to make sure I starting to misremember more things as I get older. But the Paris Olympics and the IT outage. So they did improve from 11% to 9%, but just keep in mind that that last summer was a little bit unusual. And as I always like to do, if I can go back to 2019 in the third quarter of that year, their operating margin was 16%. So they're still not, for all as great as Delta has been doing in the post-pandemic recovery period, and give them a lot of credit. There's a lot of success there, consistent double-digit margins, but they're still not quite back to where they were pre-COVID. And I guess a big reason for that would be, well, not I guess. I mean, a big reason for that is just all the cost inflation that has occurred since 2019. There's been a lot of revenue inflation. If you're Delta as well, they've been very successful in raising their revenues to help offset that cost inflation, but not quite all the way. And they're henceforth not hence not doing as well now as they were a couple of years ago. So, all right, there is that. Let me give you a few highlights. Some of you probably read the article that we ran in Airline Weekly, in our latest issue. That kind of gives a more in-depth look at how Delta performed in the third quarter. I'll just pull out a couple of points for the sake of this discussion. I think it's very important. One very big important change that Delta witnessed, and I think it's particularly important because it's probably going to be something you hear from everybody else too. We'll see, what United says on Thursday by the time you're listening to this, and then we'll see what some of the other domestic players, whether it be American, JetBlue, Southwest, etc., Frontier, what they say about it. But it does appear that the domestic situation has been improved a lot, and that was something that a lot of airlines complained about, including some of the low cost carriers that got into a lot of trouble, like the Spirits and the Frontiers. They complained a lot that the domestic unit revenues have been rather weak all year. However, they did say, in the summer, and there was that Morgan Stanley event that I think we referred to last week, that out in California, that was in early September.
Yes.
Most airlines did say that, hey, we're not kidding. Things are looking much better domestically going into the fall, and Delta did in fact see a substantial improvement. And let me see if I can pull their numbers quickly. Uh, yeah, so it looks like Delta added about 4% more ASM capacity year over year last quarter in the domestic market. So they grew, but their unit revenue still grew by 2%. So, and their yields grew by 4%. So, and if anybody wants to know the difference between yields and unit revenue, you can ask for just contact us, and we'll give you the whole airline economics 101 class for your entertainment. If you, but just to be brief, I mean, unit revenue includes empty seats, yields don't. We're just talking about how much passengers are paying per 1 mile. So anyway, yields up 4%, unit revenues up 2%. So it was nice. It was a welcome, let's say, development, and we'll see if other carriers have experienced the same. If they comment similarly, and I suspect they will. Now, moving to international, the transatlantic stuff for Delta, which is very very important market for them. Disappointing. The yields were down. They grew capacity about 5%. Unit revenue was down 7%. But they also kind of said the fall is looking really healthy. First of all, premium has been, great throughout. And some of the non-premium stuff is starting to get better. Delta talks a lot about how not as many people are traveling to, and I think we may have talked about this in our preview in our last podcast a week ago, so I won't belabor the point, but Delta talked about how a lot of that transatlantic demand, particularly to Europe, has shifted into the fall. So they're seeing that. And then Delta gave very bullish comments with respect to corporate demand. And it sounds like corporate travel departments they were really spooked back in, let's say, April, Mayish, when you had these new tariffs, and I think there was a lot of uncertainty in the economy. And then we kind of moved into that summer period, and things maybe got a little bit better. But now it appears that a lot of that uncertainty has dissipated, at least among people booking tickets in these corporate travel departments, because Delta said, companies they're on the move, and it does make sense based on the mere fact that the economy is growing rather strongly right now. It's kind of an odd economy. There's some unique, let's say, support structures to that economic growth. There's a big parts of the economy that are in recession or close to it, including manufacturing and housing and the freight economy, and you can go on the agricultural economy. But this whole AI spending boom is one big pillar of the current economic strength. And then you have people, particularly upper income households, that are still spending a lot of money, whether or not, maybe that's because they own a bunch of these AI stocks, which have gone up a lot. That's, I think, a big foundation of their spending power. But for whatever the cause, upper income Americans are still spending a lot of money. And you know what they're spending on, Gordon? Not new cars, or not new maybe some new furniture for the house. But what are they spending on, Gordon?
They are traveling.
they're traveling, and in what class are they traveling in?
Definitely not main cabin.
Definitely not main cabin.
We
And
we
in
we
what
we we we
airline?
we generalize, of course, Jay, but, yeah, looking at the big picture, it is definitely a case of, to trivialize it a little bit, it's the baby boomers who have done pretty well in the stock market and don't have a huge amount of outgoings. The mortgage is paid off. They've got a nice, comfy retirement, and they're saying, "Hey, you know what? Sicily in October looks great. Let's go in premium."
Yep, I think that's it. And yeah, and Delta's definitely enjoying that, and I'm sure United's going to say the same thing. Now, again, these most of these other airlines, including even to an extent American, because remember they're more domestic than United or Delta. So we'll have to see if they're seeing it on their end too. But it's in terms of the long haul overseas stuff, Delta and United are still sitting pretty there. It seems like.
Yeah, there was, just on your AI stock comment, Jay, AI-related enterprises have accounted for 80% of the gains in the American stock market so far this year.
Wow. Wow.
So
Yeah, and there's another. I don't have any numbers behind this, and right in front of me, I did see some numbers, but keep in mind that computer equipment is exempted from all tariffs. So all this, I mean, these AI companies, whether the names, Meta and Google and OpenAI and all these guys, they are importing extraordinary amounts of semiconductors from Taiwan, and you can go on and on. You know, equipment from Japan, equipment from the Netherlands, and that stuff is tariff free. So when you wonder why, I mean, I realize this is not an economics podcast, so I'll stop after this sentence. But if anybody's wondering, how is the economy still holding up with all these tariffs? Well, one answer is that a lot of a lot of what's driving the economic boom is not being tariffed. So keep that in mind. And
once
then the
in
stuff like the automobiles, the stuff that is getting hit hard by tariffs, that stuff is in recession.
once an econ grad, always an econ grad, right, Jay?
Yeah, I know. I can't stop. I gotta discipline myself.
That's right. That's what editing's for afterwards. That's why we're not. That's why we're
Yeah.
not live.
Well, we'll see if this makes the final cut.
Yeah, find out. Tune in next week to find out how much of Jay's Econ 101. Actually, I don't want to cheapen it. That was not Econ 101. That was Airline Economics 201 at least.
201. Yeah, give me that. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Appreciate that
Or that's
bonus
like
insight.
the guy in the armchair screaming in the corner.
Yeah, that class would definitely lower my GPA, I think. Thank you for that, Jay. Bit of bonus insight there more broadly off the back of those Delta numbers. And of course, we'll have all the latest financials as we get them in our latest Airline Weekly issues. A reminder that as an Airline Weekly subscriber, you get access to all the airline news day to day on skiff.com, plus Skiff Research's airline reports. Go to airlineweekly.com/subscribe for a free trial issue. Thanks to Jay for joining me this week. Thanks also to our producers, Monica and Will. And wherever you are in the world, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now. Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skiff channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.